The insane facts about the Russian army. The men from Russia's 155th Naval Infantry Brigade said they were fumbling aimlessly through cratered farmland without maps, medical kits, or working walkie-talkies. They had been factory employees and truck drivers just a few weeks previously, watching a continuous parade of alleged Russian military achievements on state television at home until getting recruited in September. One of the medics was a former barista with no medical training. In this video, we explore a few insane facts about the Russian army on our channel. Just scary. Horrific culture. The Russian military's preferred marching technique is the goose step. It began in the middle of the 18th century with the Prussian army, spread to Russia in the 19th, and was fully exploited by the Imperial Russian Army in the early 20th. The Soviet Union used the Soviet ceremonial military practice to train the militaries of its client states during the Cold War, particularly those in the Warsaw Pact. The East German National Volksarmee, in which the Soviets fostered a Prussian-style goose step, is a famous instance of this. Only days after ordering a partial mobilization due to recent Russian military losses in Ukraine, Russian President Vladimir Putin has approved legislation toughening the punishment for the soldiers who refused to fight. According to measures approved by Parliament and the Federation Council this week and put into effect by Putin's signature, those who voluntarily enter Ukrainian captivity might anticipate up to 10 years in prison. An initial offender, however, may be excused from criminal liability if he took measures for his release, returned to his unit or place of service, and did not commit subsequent crimes while in captivity, according to the law posted on the State Duma website. As the conflict in Ukraine puts more and more strain on Moscow's political, military, and economic sway, analysts warned the Moscow Times that Russia is losing influence over former Soviet republics in Central Asia. According to Paul Stronsky, a specialist on Russia's relations with Central Asia at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, there is growing conflict between the Kremlin, its proxies, and local Central Asian elites. According to experts, leaders in Central Asia are utilizing Russia's waning power to reorient their economy, in addition to being concerned about the precedent Moscow's attack on a former Soviet state set. At the Shanghai Cooperation Organization conference last week in Uzbekistan, when the Indian and Chinese leaders reportedly reprimanded President Vladimir Putin, Russia's weakened influence was displayed. Hell like life. A Russian soldier claims to his mother that the young Ukrainians killed in his first firefight resembled him exactly. Another tells his wife that he is intoxicated since it is simpler to kill civilians while drunk. Despite all the tragedy, a third person wants his partner to know that he only dreams about being with her. The approximately 2,000 secret recordings of intercepted talks between Russian soldiers in Ukraine and their loved ones back home provide a new perspective on Vladimir Putin's ongoing battle. According to Ukrainian authorities, war crimes were perpetrated in Bucha, a village south of Kyiv that quickly came to represent Russian horrors. The AP was able to track down calls made in March 2022 by members of a military division. These demonstrate how woefully unprepared young soldiers and their nation were for the impending war. Several people enlisted in the military because they needed the money and were abruptly told of their deployment. They were assured that Kyiv would fall peacefully within a week and would be hailed as heroes for freeing Ukraine from the control of the Nazis and the Western allies who supported them. Before we move to this next one, you guys can see that white subscribe button, right? We would like you to hit it so hard that it turns gray, and also press that like button. The intercepts also reveal that soldiers' fear levels increased when they learned how greatly they had been misled. The violence that was once inconceivable becomes commonplace. Moments of rare relief were provided by drinking and looting. Some said they were carrying out orders to execute civilians. Rigorous training. The young guys in the Kremlin film who were going to fight in Ukraine were dressed in brand new uniforms and had all the necessary combat gear, including helmets, bulletproof vests, and sleeping bags. They shook their heads when Putin asked if they were having any issues. That contrasts sharply with the widespread concerns about equipment shortages, poor living conditions, and inadequate training for new members that have been making the rounds on Russian news outlets and social media. Since Putin announced the mobilization on September 21, 2022, independent media, human rights advocates, and those who are called up have painted a gloomy picture of a hasty, disorganized, and ethnically biased attempt to round up as many men as possible and push them swiftly to the front lines, regardless of skill, training, and equipment. Putin's order for partial mobilization did not specify how many people would be called up or the requirements for draftees. According to Sergei Shoigu, Minister of Defense, only roughly 300,000 reservists with relevant combat or military experience will be impacted. Tens of thousands of men fled Russia for neighboring countries to avoid being called into service after conscription rallies were violently put down. In a shooting at a training facility in the southern Belgorod region, 11 persons were murdered and 15 others were injured. Also, administrative structures such as enlistment offices have been burned down. The mobilization procedure wasn't handled carefully in a nation where practically all men under 65 are registered as reserves. Numerous cases have been of people without prior military experience receiving call-up summonses. A reporter for the Evening Standard claims that there is compelling evidence of Russian troops, particularly trainees, suffering from hypothermia and passing away even at training camps. He thought it was truly amazing. He mentioned inadequate clothing, chilly temperatures, and bad sleeping bags. The correspondent added that although it is difficult for the troops to fight in the cold, the battles go on. He noted that citizens of Ukraine have been able to rely on neighboring countries for home generators, despite Russia's ongoing attacks on the country's energy infrastructure. The shrinking paychecks. According to a report from the Russian news outlet Caucasus, some Russian servicemen who served in Ukraine are reluctant to come back and fight because their salaries have been reduced. Realities. Members of the Russian Guard from the Russian city of Krasnodar have reported that they do not want to be returned to Ukraine. A Federal Forces of the National Guard source claimed that many soldiers refused to fight in the Caucasus because they were unhappy with the compensation they received while stationed in Ukraine from February to April. Reports of facts. According to the source quoted in the article, one factor contributing to decreasing paychecks was the rising exchange rate of the ruble, the country's currency. Salary for the second month comes late, and if they paid $100,000 in the first month, they will now pay $50,000. The command justified this by the decline in the dollar's value. According to the report's summary, if the dollar rate in Russia on March 10th was 120 rubles, it had fallen to 56 rubles by May 26th, which is why military payments had changed. The Wall Street Journal reports that the ruble's value has increased significantly, jumping by nearly 150% since it initially collapsed right after the invasion. Miseries are everywhere until heard. That's it for today. Subscribe to our channel Just Scary to always take advantage of these amazing stories and articles about hidden scenarios. Like the video and share it with your family and friends.